Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Donchev Podcast, where we explicate and analyze literature of all kinds. Today, we'll be looking at poetry, more specifically, indigenous poetry. The poem This River, written by Katarina Vermette. So, today we have multiple things to talk about, such as literary terms, the central ideas and themes of the poem itself, and how it relates to the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and its calls to action. And yes, so to begin, this river. The summary of this river is told by Katarina Vermette, which is a river which has been neglected by. It's a river which has been neglected by the modern culture of everybody, including modern white Canadians, Asians, and everybody of all kinds. This river is relating to the past history of what happened. It's a very unfortunate case, and it was this river, which is mentioned, is a real river, and it was a dumping for indigenous bodies. And it's very, very unfortunate. Katarina Vermette, some backstory on her. She created a documentary which went in with some of her friends, and they were out to find indigenous bodies in the river. They took a boat and they searched and searched and searched for her friend's sister, and it was very, very sad. It was very almost disgusting to watch, just to see how left this and this river and this area, how it's just been not touched, not looked at, because it's just been tossed to the side. And a perfect quote from the river is, "She is like the pillars of old piers, the one that stick out of the water, lapped over by every wake. This river is ignored. People cross the street to avoid this river. This river is so inconvenient. They have to make bridges to cut across her inconsistent bends. This river is being just thrown aside because it's just so inconvenient for all the officials and government of Canada, because they know truthfully what has actually happened to the river. They are trying to forget all about it. They're trying to duct tape it off and just pretend like it never existed because of how awful the history is." Our sorry, that's our kitty cat. To continue. The river is ignored. This is basically a direct reference to the justice system blatantly ignoring the Indigenous crisis happening. And it is not just the justice system. I think it's everybody that is everyone's trying to just ignore this problem and put in the back of their mind. And this is absolutely correct, because before I watched that documentary, even reading this poem, before watching the documentary, I had no idea. I had no clue that this poem was even referring to something so heinous as this situation. Hundreds of bodies were dumped, and it is not fair. I think it's a clear call to action, and how it relates to the TRC. It's a call to action because they made a whole documentary, and Katarina made a poem to call attention to this issue that is almost never discussed, and it has been executed perfectly. Because I know this because now our school system is involving it or integrating it in the curriculum, and me and along with my peers and my special guest here, we're all learning together about the history that has just been swept under the rug by the Canadian government. The TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, called 96 calls to action in 2015. It was the most that has ever been called, and I believe that this river, the poem and the documentary, could honestly just be added to that list. This is a perfect poem that provides perspective, context, and it really leaves the viewer or the reader with a lasting impression to go and discuss it further. And honestly, that's why I'm here discussing it with you guys, because it needs to be talked about. The poem uses multiple literary devices, such as metaphors, simile, imagery, and even allusion. I'll talk about metaphor, and I think our special guest here, Sharon, can take it away. Um, so, for example, a metaphor, for example, and I believe it's a very powerful metaphor. So, just for context, the poem switches perspective and it switches its point of view all the time. Um, for example, it switches from representing indigenous culture, and then it switches to it being a personified um, indigenous person and even indigenous women. In this example, it is, I believe, a personification of indigenous people altogether. This is the quote. She is love. She is the eagles soaring above the trees. She is power pushing pure north. This is a very powerful point of the poem, and I think it really enhances the idea, one of the central themes of the poem, and specifically, she is power pushing pure north. A friend of mine made this reference in a seminar that her and I did, and I'm going to take inspiration from her. Her name's Rylan. Thank you very much, and she was able to understand what this meant. She's power pushing pure north. The the reference or the saying of like that northern attitude in is especially popular in Canadian culture. It's when um, after living up north for so long in such blistering dark temperatures, they've learned to grow an attitude about it, and they've learned to just like understand that like yeah, this is my life, and I'm not gonna complain about it at all. I think there's two meanings here in this quote. I think that one, it's pushing against the Europeans coming over and really realizing how harsh the north face is of Canada, and how the more north you go, the rougher it gets, especially in the wintertime. It's almost like it's showing that it's a pushback. Like the indigenous people aren't crumbling, they aren't being all sad about it. They're toughing it out because this is their land and their culture. And it's almost a way of showing how more resilient they are to their homeland than the colonizers and pioneers that came. And the second, I believe, is honestly just a metaphor for how strong the indigenous culture is. It is such it's very deeply rooted. It dates back thousands of hundreds of years, and I believe that the power is that they're just so determined to keep their land and their culture like active almost, and to keep it really like in the world, like what's a word you think, like something like
Relevance.
yes, relevant, like perfect, thank you very much, like a relevant, it's they're keeping it relevant, they're keeping their culture relevant, and they're trying to, no matter how hard it's been through residential schools and assimilation and all this nasty things, all these nasty things, um, they're still toughing it out and they're still trying to push that power and their culture forward. There's another, especially literary advice that sticks out to me, and I'm actually gonna have our special guest here, Sharon. Um, she's going to read them out. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Thank you, Richie, and thanks for inviting me into this really important conversation.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm going to read a short passage, and then we can dive into it just a little. With the wondering eyes of Norval Morrisseau and the wandering hands of Daphne Ojeg. So those two lines are really interesting to me. So on the one hand, the author is pulling in references to some significant, a couple of really significant contributors to Indigenous art.
Yeah.
So Norval Morrisseau, for example, is known to almost have been, go out and scout the wilderness and scout the environment, looking for inspiration and looking for that unique story that they can tell through the art form.
And not just in nature, but also in Indigenous communities as well and their culture. He did a very good job of really looking and seeking some things that represent the culture and the land really well. And he was an expert at, as you were saying, as really painting that and transferring it into his pieces of art. So yeah, please
Excellent.
continue.
Yeah, thanks for that, Richie. And let's just call attention to the wording here. The wondering eyes. Think about that, because it's not just the eyes that are, visually seeing something. There's a connection with a thoughtful process that's happening there. It triggers curiosity and it sparks looking for a different perspective, which is exactly what this poem is doing by nature, right? So the wandering eyes, I think, is really interesting. And then the second reference here is the wandering hands of Daphne Ojeg. So the wandering hands, again, to think about the almost like whimsical wording for that, this is an artist who isn't just creating real artifacts with her hands, which she's doing, but she's using her hands to explore the subjects that she's turning into art. So the wandering hands, it's almost like there's a real visualization to that.
It's almost like it's just flowing through her limbs from her body. It's her ideas are flowing out of her onto the canvas. Yeah.
Flowing like the river.
Yeah, like the Red River. Isn't that amazing?
So yeah, a couple really interesting pieces of allusion here in this piece of really incredible writing.
Yeah. All right, so to wrap up, thank you very much, Sharon, for being a part of this conversation. And I think, honestly, that concludes our podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for next time. I think next time we'll be talking about a poem for Duncan Campbell Scott, an incredible piece of writing written in 1994, nearly a century after the Onondaga Madonna, written by DCS himself. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you. See ya.
Sometimes you gotta close the door.
All right, bye.
Window. See how long this is.
All right.
I have a weird feeling it's